All right, as you'll recall in the last lesson, we were learning how to apply the 7 elements of art in a landscape drawing. Remember what the objective was. The objective had 3 parts: to identify, to define, and to apply the 7 elements of art in a landscape drawing. And you'll remember the 7 elements are line, shape, form, value, texture, space, and color. And so we systematically began with line, moved into shape and form. So one dimension, line is one-dimensional, shape is two-dimensional, form is three-dimensional. And then we moved into value, which gave us our shading. So if we look at this drawing, if we were to identify a line, you could point to this, or I could identify a line here, and we might describe the lines as bumpy, wavy, zigzag, or straight lines. We can identify shapes, such as the circle used for the sun or the moon, depending on what you're going to do in the final design. The pentagon shape, the parallelograms here, 2 parallelograms. Even the shape of the shadow. So there's shape, and the form is the whole. The form is that three-dimensional aspect where there's a height, a width, a depth to the form, and same on the circle. The circle becomes a sphere, like an orb floating in space. And so we have that, and then we also have value. Value refers to light and shadow. We recall that the light hits the mountains, casts a shadow on each side. The light hits the house, casts a shadow. So that's where we left off. And today, again, what we're going to do is pick up where we left off. You can see here we have line, shape, form, value. And what we're going to be doing now is moving into texture. So go ahead and find that empty spot. Make sure you have your paper. Find that empty spot. And we're going to write the word texture. T-E-X-T-U-R-E. And texture is what really gives something the sense that if you touched it, this is what it would feel like. So we can use texture words like rough, smooth, bumpy, soft. These are texture words. But texture is, in this case, since we're talking visual arts, you can have 2 types. It can be applied to, or implied texture, or it can be actual texture. We're using implied texture in this video. So a texture is what does it look like it would feel like. It's probably the longest definition we'll use. What does it look like it would feel like? In other words, would it be rocky? If you look behind me in the screen here, these mountains would look rough and jagged, where the clouds up here behind me, they look smooth and soft. And then if we take another look, we look at the water, we look at the grass here, this would look more soft. If we look at the water, it's wet water, it's not frozen, it's not a frozen lake, it's flowing, it would be wet. Again, the mountains up top here would be jagged and rough. And again, if we looked over here at the grass would be smooth down here, and the treetops, we could see all these different textures that tell us what something would feel like to the sense of touch. So underneath texture, what I'd like you to write is that same circle we started with. That same circle, and we're going to call that smooth. And then we're going to go a little bit, and we're going to call that bumpy. And then we're going to draw a little bit further, and we're just going to kind of make it explode over here, and we would call it rough. So just this continuum of feeling, sense of touch. So texture has to do with touch. You can even write that if you wanted to. Touch. Texture has to do with a sense of touch. Smooth, bumpy, rough. Let's see if we can add some textures now to our drawing. So if you flip your drawing over, we can already see some textures are evident here with the treetops, like I showed you in the painting behind me, the jagged mountains, the smooth sun or moon, whatever you're going to make it, the smooth sides of the house. So let's go ahead and now practice adding some textures. Some textures that we might see would typically be things like grass. So if you just put a few little marks like this to indicate grass, these are just controlled scribble marks that you might find just to indicate that this is a grassy field, and maybe some grass is growing up on this side of the river as well, if this is a river. Which brings me to the next texture. Perhaps we make this, let's zoom in a little bit here, perhaps we can make this, we could make this water into some trickling wet water, right? So if we took this water that we have here and we just simply add some little ripple effects, some little rippling effects, even a couple thick ones like this might even just kind of make these ripple effects, and we could turn that into a stream of running water. So we know that's wet, running water. We've got some grasses on either side. Perhaps there was an area where there's some stones, and we want to put some stones in there. By drawing some stones. And just put some dots to show that there's a grassy shore, some rocks along the water's edge, and the actual water itself. And that's pretty good. All right. Move that camera up. Okay. So there we have some texture, and already that's added some richness to it. And we could go ahead back in these trees and perhaps put some more kind of rough lines to create those rough trees, just like I showed you in my video behind me, in these rough trees here. To show those treetops that are rough, we could add some rough lines. That also makes it stand out away from the hills in the background. Okay, so then on the house, let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit on this house here, and let's take a look. How about if we put, for some texture, we put a door, and a window. Now some of my students say to me, well, you can't put anything on that because it's already shaded, but that's not the truth. If you look around the room, I'm sure you can find spots that are in shadow in the room, but you can still see what's there. So the same is true on a house. There are different sides of the house that are shaded differently. You might want to put some little indications of glass, and then maybe some lines or some bricks to give the house some texture. And we can do something similar here on the side. If we put maybe some windows, maybe some windows on the top floor as well. And you'll notice the shape of these windows is the same as the shape of the side of the house. And that's something that point out there. The windows need to be congruent. Congruent. For instance, if I had a house that looked like this, and I just took this window and moved it over and made it like this, that wouldn't look right on the side because it's not congruent. Congruent means that the sides, the top of the window, should be parallel with the top of the window here, the top of the house. The side of the house should be parallel with the side of the window. The back of the house should be parallel with the back of the window, and the bottom of the house should be parallel with the bottom. And so that makes it look more correct, more congruent. And let's talk about some textures we might put on the roof. A couple of textures you could do are upside down T's, or some people like to put, let me do it on this one. Some people like to do just little U's. So if you put 3 little U's and 2 little U's next to each other, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, it makes it look more like a gingerbread house. So that's up to you. Okay. Very good. So that's texture. We've been adding texture. Let's go ahead to the next element of art. So we have line, shape, form, value, texture. The next element is space. So let's go ahead and write space. S-P-A-C-E, space. And I have a simple definition for this one. Distance. Space is essentially distance. And you could see in this painting, clearly the artist was capable of creating space. If you look right here, this waterfall I'm pointing to looks like it's so far away. And so do these deer. These deer look pretty far away as well, but they look much closer than this waterfall in the distance. And these Hudson River painters, such as Albert Bierstadt, who actually painted this painting, the Hudson River School painters, they really perfected the art of taking a canvas and creating this vast amount of space. You can see the river, or maybe it's a lake, reflecting the mountains, and it's a reflection of the waterfall here. And then if you look up here into these clouds and these peaks, these giant mountain peaks, it's just beautiful. And it looks so far away, but that's the illusion of space. And we can create space in a couple of different ways. We can create space by making something smaller or by overlapping. And there's many other ways, but that's just 2 of them. So let's write this down. So under distance, let's go ahead and write the word overlapping. Overlapping. O-V-E-R-L-A-P-P-I-N-G. Overlapping. That's one way of creating space. Putting one circle in front of another circle. And you can do that pretty much endlessly, so that one is in front of the other, and it looks like the one closest is actually this one, because it's overlapping all the others. And we could do that as well using overlapping and changing the size. So changing the size of an object also can do this. So if I put a line here and I put one circle here, a real tiny circle with a shadow there, and perhaps a medium circle here, medium size, and a big circle. So I'm changing the object size and its distance from the horizon line as well. So write that down. Overlapping and changing the object size. Those are 2 ways you can create space. All right, and let's flip that over. Let's see if we can do some of that. If we take and make some clouds, like we see here in the Bierstadt painting, if we take and just kind of make almost like the tree line that we made earlier, if we take this bumpy bumpy line and kind of set it behind. So we're using overlapping. The clouds are being overlapped by the mountains, which look like they're in front of them. And we bring up a second. And we can even give a light shading just to kind of make it a little different. So we've got these clouds that are overlapping. Maybe we put a cloud over here. Puffy clouds. Yours can be anything you want. You can do circles, ovals, whatever you're comfortable with. Little bumpy lines. And also in terms of overlapping, what we can do is put a chimney on this house. So if you look at the top of the house here, you can zoom in a little bit. If I were to take and just figure out how high I want my chimney, put a little point. Then I figure out how wide do I want my chimney, put another little point. And then right between those 2 points, right in the middle, put a point above and a point below the center. And then just connect those 4. I would get something like this. I've heard it referred to as a square halo. It's like this square that's hovering above. And if you take those and just connect those down, it ends up looking like a chimney that's being overlapped by the front of the house. And you can add a couple bricks by putting some little rectangular looking things. If you wanted to add some smoke coming out of the chimney, that's fine. In your final drawing, that's what you would want to do. Remember, this drawing is just for us to practice some of these concepts, and then you can apply them however you want to. But if we take that same concept of the chimney and we put some of those same things over here, they would not represent chimneys, but they might represent buildings. So if I took the same idea like this, if I took a line up and a line coming down, 2 straight lines, straight line diagonal up, straight line diagonal down. If I took those 2 lines and then I connect the left, the middle, and the right, well, this kind of looks like a building over here in the distance. Now I could do the same thing. I could make them as tall as I want. So again, if I took 3 points, just like this, connect those 3 points so that one goes up, one goes down, and then just simply connect those 3 points back down, and then put some windows. Since it's so far away, it looks far away because it's in the distance and it's smaller. We know these buildings are probably great big. But you can make your own buildings. I've had students who put their favorite phones, their favorite billboards up here. They just basically create a billboard, something like this, and they put whatever they want here. So you can have fun with this. So if you look around the room, you could probably see some of these. Okay, and maybe put some windows. Again, these are just kind of fun to do. And it all starts out, like I said, with just a line that goes up, a line that goes down, and then you connect those 3 points. Make sure you're connecting all 3 points and making them go behind some other line. And it looks as if they're overlapping. All right. So there it is. And then let's try something else. We have some space over here that kind of needs to be used up. Let's try some trees. If I put like a little pine tree up here. A little pine tree, which is almost like a cone shape. For those of you who have studied with me before, you know that we like to draw the cone shapes. And if I simply add some texture, makes it look like a tree. And I make a small one in the distance, maybe even a real tiny one back here. And then maybe a large one here in the foreground. So using that cone. Just kind of filling those in with some textured lines. Alright, and then we would need a shadow on these because the light is coming from over here and hitting these trees. So we would need a shadow that looks like a cone. Shadow that looks like a cone. Yes. So there it is. Now the last element of art that we might want to add is color. And color, this can be illustrated in a fun way. Color. Color is, all the color is reflected light. Color is reflected light. And so if you put a diagram of an eye, a person's eye, and then put a piece of paper, and then put a light bulb. The light hits the paper and is reflected back to the eye, and that's how we see color. And I can demonstrate that to you as well. So there it is, the 7 elements of art, starting with line, shape, form, value, texture, space, and color. Make sure you have all of those accounted for. And the next lesson will be on how to apply color to your drawing. Actually, how to expand and enlarge your drawing and make it your own, some possible ways, and then also how to add color. Alright, thank you. We'll see you next time. Make sure you clean up and give all your things to your substitute teacher so that when I come back, I'll be able to find your work, because I'd hate for you to lose it. Alright, take care. Bye-bye.